Hello, lovely people. Welcome. This is a brand new NYCOS activity. We are having a new project for 2020, and I'm nicknaming it NYCOS TV. I've got a few guests, which I will welcome and interview. We're going to play some music. Lots of different things will happen. Now, lots of people listening at the minute will recognize the words I'm about to say. What is the piece of music? What did you say? And so I'm delighted to be able to introduce one of the world's leading classical composers and somebody I'm delighted to say I can consider a friend. Please welcome James MacMillan.
Hello there, it's great to be with you all.
Hey, thank you very much indeed. Well, this is a new venture for us. We haven't done this before. We're at a residential course, but it's online, it's virtual. So normally we'd be at Merkston Castle School with 180 singers and 20 staff. And in the evening, we have social events. So we're trying to make them a little different. And so we're having this TV show, and you are our very, very first guest.
I'm, what a responsibility.
Absolutely. Now tell us, where are you?
I'm at home in Ayrshire, in North Ayrshire. I live out in the countryside, up in the North Ayrshire hills. The nearest town is Arran, and from my study I can see over into, I can see the islands of Arran and the island of Cumbria, and I can see a little bit of the Firth of Clyde as well. The nearest town is Largs.
Now, if I remember correctly, that's the part of the world that you actually grew up in. Am I right?
Yes, I spent my formative years in the East Ayrshire town of Cumnock, which is about 30 odd miles from here. We might talk about that later. And so I was there until about university age, and then I came to Edinburgh where I met you.
Yes, and it's been, your career has gone up and mine has plateaued as a result of our meeting. Not the world doesn't know that we sang in a barbershop quartet.
Yes, it was a seminal moment for both of us, I think, in many ways.
Yes. One of the more important things in my career was that I stopped singing and started conducting. I don't think my career was. I wasn't on the up as far as the singing was concerned. Um, uh, I'd obviously love to talk about Cantos Sagrados. It's a piece that I met first in 1993 when the Edinburgh Festival was doing a retrospective of your music. Cantos was written in 1989 and premiered in 1990 in Edinburgh. And 1990 was a very big year for you because that was when your big orchestral piece, Confession of Isabel Gaudi, was played at the Proms, and that catapulted you onto the world stage. 1990, a brilliant year. Can you tell us about that and maybe give us some insights into Cantos? What was that year like? Heady year?
It was a very wonderful year in many ways. I was turning 30 or so at the time, and my music wasn't really well known at that stage. But then, when the Confession of Isabel Gaudi was played at the BBC Proms, that all changed through the broadcast of the piece on the BBC, but it was also on the television as well. And so suddenly, thousands of people were listening to my music. And I was writing a lot of different kinds of pieces at the time, not just big orchestral works like The Confession of Isabel Gaudi, but trying to get back into the world of choral music. I loved writing for choirs. I loved working with choirs when I was younger. And I remember thinking at the time, what kind of text could I set? Of course, we know that through the ages, composers have set these wonderful liturgical texts and sacred texts. And there's something quite ironic about the title Cantos Sagrados, which means sacred songs in Spanish. Because yes, on one hand, the work does have some sacred texts, but essentially the most prominent texts, the ones in English, the translations of the Spanish are very political texts, very modern texts. So Cantus Sagrados is a combination of the old and the new, the sacred and the secular, the political and the religious.
So talking about getting a wee bit political, you and I have been involved in a project over the last 3 or 4 days because you, I, and about 25 other leading choral and singers in Scotland have written to the Scottish government to ask for better consideration of singing as part of the plans to get out of COVID-19. We feel that there's been a lot of attention on orchestral music. Nobody seems to be talking about the singing, except trying to say kind of bad things. Singing is dangerous, and that's as someone who started NYCOS, has got 15 regional choirs feeding into a national boys choir, national girls choir, international training choir, and NYCOS itself. It's very hard to hear that the thing we've devoted 25 years to now has bad after it. It feels terrible. I don't like that at all. We're going to have to work hard to stop that connection.
Oh, I think so. And I think there's a lot of anecdotal views about out there that singing is in some way unhealthy or dangerous. And there needs to be proper research done. That's now being done. And I think it will bring a very different perspective of singing and playing wind instruments to the debate. And the politicians especially need to be up to speed on that. I think they've just accepted the anecdotal view that there's a problem with singing. But once these researchers start feeding through, and it's up to us to tell people about them, and I've been looking at some very interesting research from Germany, which totally contradicts this view that there's something dangerous about the vapours coming from singers' mouths. Once the politicians and the experts and so on have engaged with the evidence, I'm sure we'll be on a new roadmap to bring the music back. That's my hope. And we need to be optimistic, and we need to make the case to powerful people like politicians that the arts and musicians and music making should not be neglected and ignored.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your support in that. I was very pleased when you said you would get involved in the project. I know you've written an article for the Times, so I look forward to reading that. I'm hoping that if we can't sing inside, that we'll be able to meet in parks or in outdoor stadiums or in outdoor arenas and be able to sing surrounded by fresh air. Because as we know, of course, it's nice and mild and warm in Scotland during the summer. Not, oh dear. Anyway, that is my hope. What have you been doing during lockdown? Is there have you been taking the opportunity to file your CD collection, or have you taken the opportunity to write a piece of music that you didn't think you would have had time to write?
Well, I have written a lot of music these last few months, and in many ways, life has gone on as normal for me. That's what composers do. We're used to this isolation. We need to be isolated. We need to work in an environment of silence and solitude. So in that sense, it's been life as normal, but just that little bit more intense and unchanging. And I've shared the worries of everyone else, especially the worries and the anxieties that musicians feel. But I have got a lot of music written, including some choral music. I've just finished a big work for a German radio choir, which will be over an hour long.
Wow.
Through composed work that could be semi-staged or staged. I don't think it's an opera as such, but it's a setting of an ancient medieval liturgical text written by Hildegard of Bingen, basically. That's been a completely new venture for me to create something of that size and of that dramatic and ritualistic scope. There is one percussion instrument involved so that it helps with pitch throughout, so that the choir is not singing for an hour without any help in finding their notes.
So the NYCOS singers have enjoyed many of your pieces, Jimmy. We've done Radiant Dawn, we've done some of the Strathclyde motets, and of course, it was a great privilege. It was my hope that I would get to do the first orchestral version of Cantos to record it. So we managed to do that. I adore working on your music, and I look forward to seeing a lot more in the future. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the very first NYCOS television broadcast.
Thank you, and good luck in everything you're doing, Christopher.
Thank you so much. And now for something completely different. We're heading off to the United States of America, where, as people know, I've been living actually pretty much for the last 3 years. I've had a relationship with a festival in Chicago for 20 years, but for the last 3 years, I've been living in Washington, D.C. But NYCOSians will remember that we also have a relationship with the United States. 2006, we went to Chicago. 2016, we did Chicago and in Wyoming. And in Wyoming, we sang one of the world's most famous pieces. So can you believe that sound? People say a youth choir cannot sing Beethoven 9. Well, that recording belies that fact. That was the National Youth Choir of Scotland at the Grand Teton Festival, Music Festival, conducted by Donald Runnicles. And those pictures of the performance and also of the wonderful scenery. And we're going straight now to Wyoming to Donald Runnicles.
Good afternoon. Hi, Christopher.
Very nice to see you. And wasn't it wonderful to hear that? And remember that in 2016, we nailed that performance in your wonderful concert hall in Wyoming.
Well, under normal circumstances, I would go, wow. And under these surreal circumstances, I would say, wow, wow. I mean, in terms of where the world has become so silent, and hearing that unbelievable chorus in this incredibly beautiful place brings back sweet, poignant memories.
You know, you've given me the tingles saying that, because, you know, I've known you a long time now, and I know your passion for music, and I know your love of NYCOS. You've offered us many wonderful opportunities. You know, we've thought about the fabulous Mozart Requiem that we did with you, firstly in the city halls in Glasgow and then in Edinburgh, and then you invited us to the proms, and you've just said wow. And I don't know if you remember, but after the Dies Irae in the performance, there is a camera catching you looking at the choir saying wow. So we're very, very grateful for your wow, because we know you get to work with some really fancy people. So what does it feel like at the minute? I know what I feel like about the silence. I know about the fact that I hate the fact that I'm not physically working with the NYCOS choir this week. We're having to do it online. Can you see when your next performance is coming? What's the future holding for us?
Christopher, we here at the festival we've had to, like virtually every cultural organization in the world, we've had to cancel our big festival, which would have begun quite literally in 2 days. Of course, July the 4th is the traditional beginning of the festival. We are, though, coronavirus permitting, the county and the state governor permitting, planning on doing 3 concerts in August. These concerts are without an audience. Obviously, there is a mandatory number of people that can be in one room, and with our hall being as large as it is, we plan on bringing in 35 musicians. who would normally have been here this week from around the country. Most of them will drive for obvious reasons. And those 3 concerts will be recorded quasi live. They'll be filmed and they'll be broadcast or streamed 1 week later. And in fact, might be interesting to those watching this and to you that the BBC Music Magazine is very enthusiastic about partnering this, and therefore it will also be streamed, well, internationally. But those are, in answer to your question, those are the next performances. But it's all, as you know, and that I think that's what eats away at all of us. It's all so uncertain. The situation is so fluid. Tomorrow there could be an edict by which, and this has just happened today, for instance, in New Mexico, that the New Mexican Senate or the governor has insisted on a 2-week quarantine. Anybody coming into New Mexico from elsewhere. So, I mean, for instance, if that were to be done here, then of course those concerts wouldn't take place.
Yeah. The last few days, something's happened similar in the UK. The city of Leicester apparently has had a huge spike in new cases, and so they're having a kind of localized lockdown. It depends on us all to be as sensible as we can be. But what do you feel? What's your feeling about singing? Because, you know, singing is getting this reputation at the minute. Singing is bad. We're super emitters. I read something 3 or 4 weeks ago that opera singers had to be 40 feet apart. I was trying to work out how we were going to finish Tristan and Isolde with the 2 singers 40 feet apart. Are you worried about that? Or do you think that's going to fix itself over a period of time?
Well, Christopher, it's a little like, is coffee good for you? You go online and you'll get 50 different answers. I mean, there's 50 different opinions to whether singing is a good thing, whether it should be prohibited during this virus. The fact that it's the way it is purportedly transmitted. I do know that we, for instance, in Berlin, have had some chorus rehearsals, albeit outside. We have a space where it's actually usually where one stores stage designs, and just basically a lot of large things are stored there. And that is where they're rehearsing Matthew Passion, actually, or they were a couple of weeks ago. We're in vacation.
I'm hoping that we're going to get some NYCOS groups together to sing in, I don't know, Bruntsfield, or sing in a down at the Ross Bandstand, or maybe we'll all accidentally meet one day up in the Pentlands, and there'll be 20 of us, and we'll stand in a circle and sing. I think we've got to keep on singing. I mean, one of the things we're looking forward to is, and I'm announcing it here, there is a hope that you and NYCOS will be together again in 2021. You've asked us to sing Duruflé Requiem, woo! And so very grateful for your ongoing faith in the NYCOS singers. I have to tell you, NYCOS sings the bejesus out of the Duruflé Requiem, so I can't wait to be doing that with you and the BBC SSO. That's so brilliant. Thank you so much.
Christopher, if I had my way, I'd be working with you in the chorus every week, every second week. I mean, it's just the logistics of being in all these different on these different continents. It's a thrill and a privilege to work with you and these remarkable young musicians. I did just want to add to my comments about singers. I think it's there's a huge psychological element in all of this. I think the vast majority of people have no idea how you sing. That is to say, they just think, well, a singer must expel vast volumes of air, and it must be like standing in front of a wind machine where you to place yourself before a singer. And we know that truly good singing, were you to put somebody right in front of a singer, you'd be amazed how little air is actually being expelled. I mean, it's all in the diaphragm. You know, it's the reserves of air that you keep in your body, and you channel. I mean, quite literally channel through. And I do sadly think that there's an alarmist factor to all of this. And it's because they imagine, of course, the proximity that is to be taken very seriously. Of course, they're standing next to one another, but singing in some ways is no different to speaking. And I mean, are you going to start prohibiting people in groups of people speaking to one another? Because as you know, there's no really huge difference, and I think so much of this is in people's heads.
Well, recently we wrote to the Scottish government and we asked them to take singing, to allow singers, the various singing companies around, including Scottish Opera, ourselves, to be part of the conversations. We were asking not to be told, not to be given a blanket ban, some random number that we really couldn't work with. We wanted to be involved in the conversations. That's just in the last couple of days, and we're very much hoping that we'll have a place at the table there to be able to kind of talk about it in the future. Let's lift the mood a little bit, Donald. You're in the most beautiful part of the world. There will be no festival, which of course is sad, but are you getting to walk out in that wonderful scenery? Are you in the woods? Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to go up that mountain on the ski lift and look at the beautiful scenery? What's the story in the area?
Well, I was worried about being on time for this interview with you, this conversation, Christopher, because I cycled from the village, which you remember where the hall is, to our home just to get back to be able to chat with you. And so, yeah, I think this is the slightly paradoxical situation in which we find ourselves in. One associates COVID, the virus, with hardship, and there's no real hardship in being in this bucolic part of the world. Of course, one is sensitive to, vigilant about distancing from people, but that really is only happening when you're in a shop, or we don't frequent restaurants. They are open, but a lot of people, I'm sure the same is true in Scotland, a lot of are doing takeaways. Yeah. But I mean, there is no hardship associated with this, and I'm out on my bike every day, and we're on the tennis court. And as you know, this remarkable valley is very much a place where you're outdoors, and that's why many people live here. And so yeah, it's just beautiful being back, and that just adds to this surreal feeling of, I look out the window right now, or I took my bike ride, and the world is absolutely serene, and everything is good. And at the same time, as you know, 125,000 Americans have succumbed to this, and it's always this feeling of it's happening somewhere else. Yeah. But the fact that we have an invisible foe, it most certainly may be happening here too, which is why we have to be equally vigilant.
I know. Well, I'm holding hope for the future, Donald. I'm holding that hope that we get out of this. The community that is the NYCOS choir has been built up over 25 years. This should have been the 25th course. Next year will be the 25th anniversary. And it's wonderful that in that 25th anniversary, we're going to get to work with you, a Scot working on the highest international level, who likes what we do. And I'm very grateful for that. You've been very kind to us in the past, and I'm looking forward to working with you again.
Well, let me throw that right back at you, Christopher. You're very sweet to talk about my international level of music making, etc., etc. But what is so I wouldn't even say miraculous, because this has so much to do with your incredible skill in building up a choir like this, but inspiring a choir like this, and these young musicians themselves. It's one of the world's great choruses. It is a no-brainer for me, nor is it for other conductors to want to work with you, because what you bring, what your musicians bring, what they offer is at a level which you might hear in Paris, you might hear in Vienna, you might hear in London, you might not. And in addition to that, you have, of course, this incredibly protean, what's the word? Forgive me if that, I hope it's not offensive to anybody, but the testosterone in that sound is terrifying. It's just so exciting, and that's what, of course, for an audience member who, to your point, they see youth chorus. Well, I'm sure it'll be quite good, and then your chorus sings Freude, and there's this collective, and people are pinned to the back wall, and the sound. It's just, as I say, I would program us every second week, but which makes the De Rouflé all the more enticing.
We shall be looking forward to it. NYCOSians, listen up. That is the expectation of the world's high-level conductors. They want to work with you because of what you deliver. That is the expectation. You need to work hard. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you very much indeed. Donald, brilliant to see you. Brilliant to speak to you. Thank you for making a moment. You've given me chills. I mean, in these 10 minutes you've talked to me, you've given me tingles. I'm grateful for the time we spent together, and look forward to seeing you next year.
I miss you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Love everybody.
Wow, what a powerful interview. What an extraordinary thing for Donald Runnicles, working at the level that he does, to say about working with NYCOS. So there's the responsibility that we have to get back to that sound that was on the Cantos Sagrados recording. So that's the end of our first NYCOS television program. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a bit of fun. R2D2 has obviously clearly enjoyed listening in to the whole conversation. I bet you're surprised to see him there, along with Buddha. And that's actually a picture of me and Stephen Doughty playing the piano in Belfast, I think that was. Tomorrow's NYCOS TV is a complete change of mood. We're going to have people who are pretty much hot in the Scots trad kind of rock world, and they're both former members of NYCOS. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow on NYCOS TV. Thank you very much. Enjoy yourselves.